Hey, everybody. I'm on the road. I'm in a hotel room now. I'm in the States. And so I'm going to be making videos over the next few days or so from various locations, wherever I happen to be. This is the Iran update for Sunday, February 15th. There might be a second Iran update coming later today. We'll see what develops. But I want to cover a few items related to the Iran situation that might have flown under the radar. But first, some big headlines about Iran. And what I'm talking specifically about is what President Trump had to say on Friday about regime change. Have a look at this.
What can Iran do to avoid attack?
Give us the deal that they should have given us the first time. If they give us the right deal, we won't do that. But, you know, historically, they haven't done that. I will say they want to talk, but so far they do a lot of talking and no action.
When are those talks, Mr. President? When are those talks?
They've already started.
Do you want regime change in Iran?
Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. It's been going on for a long time. So let's see what happens. In the meantime, we have tremendous power has arrived, and additional power, as you know, another carrier is going out shortly. So we'll see it out. If we could get it settled for once and for all, that would be good.
All right. That is a bombshell, folks. I mean, when we're saying that here's President Trump saying that regime change would be the best thing that could happen. And then he starts talking about atrocities committed by them, that this has got to stop. And then he reminds us, of course, of all the military assets that are there. So we've been talking a lot about the mixed messages. Oh, we want negotiations, but we're also threatening. This was much more threatening than we've heard. And again, an explicit reference to regime change being a good thing. That is absolutely huge. And just to follow that up, let's take a look at what Secretary of State Rubio had to say on the Iran issue as well.
I'm not going to talk about attacks on Iran or anything of that nature because the president's made clear he prefers diplomacy and an outcome of negotiated settlement. Now, we're dealing with radical Shia clerics. Okay, we're dealing with people who make geopolitical decisions on the basis of pure theology, and it's a complicated thing. I mean, no one's ever been able to do a successful deal with Iran, but we're going to try. Steve Woodcock and Jared Kushner will be traveling. I think they're traveling right now to have important meetings, and we'll see how that turns out. And we'll always comply with the applicable laws of the United States in terms of involving Congress in any decisions. But right now, we're not talking about any of that. We are postured in the region for one simple reason, and that is that we understand that there could be threats to our forces in the region. We've seen them be threatened in the past, and we want to make sure that we have sufficient capacity to defend them if, God forbid, that were to happen. But right now, we're talking about negotiations. We are focused on negotiations. That's what we're focused. The president's made that clear. If that changes, it'll be obvious to everyone, and obviously whatever the law requires us to do, we'll do.
Okay. So again, that's a couple notable points that Secretary of State Rubio had to say there. Number one, no one's ever done a successful deal with Iran, but we're going to try. And he mentions that they make decisions based on theology. Let's put those two things together. Part of Islamic theology, part of Islamic public policy, as it were, and this is in the Quran, is the doctrine of taqiyya, which is deception, that you are supposed to, not allowed to, you're supposed to use deception with your enemies. And it's perfectly fine to use deception with your enemies. And that's why there's never been a successful deal with any Islamic theocracy. You can't have one. It's not like, oh, maybe they'll keep their word. The idea, like the concept of signing pieces of paper and shaking hands and making agreements, and therefore you're bound by them, by your word. These are Western constructs. They have nothing to do with the Islamic mindset, okay? You cannot have a successful deal. And notice what he said in the very closing words of that clip. And whatever the law requires us to do, we'll do. What's he referring to? He's referring to the War Powers Act. He's referring to the fact that we might be going to war, and yeah, we're willing to go ahead and do what the law requires us to do for that. So both this clip and the clip from President Trump really are pushing, even though they both mention negotiations, they're pushing in the direction of not having negotiations and really going to kinetic conflict. And on the Israel 365 news channel, I made a video the other day about Iran's strategy and about how they might actually want the kinetic conflict because they believe, I think, that they believe that President Trump doesn't want a prolonged conflict and is so opposed and is so afraid of a prolonged conflict that if they can, even if they get into a kinetic conflict and suffer a lot of beatings, as long as it doesn't actually bring down the regime, and it's possible that it won't. Let's understand. You can't bomb a regime out of existence. Okay, you need the people there to bring them down. You can weaken them. You can set the conditions that make it easier to bring down the regime, but you can't actually bring down the regime necessarily. And I think that they are hoping for a kinetic conflict. They're going to fire ballistic missiles at American assets. They're going to hope to kill a few Americans, and they don't need to kill that many, for the pressure on Trump to ramp up in the U.S. to end the operation and pull out, especially from the more isolationist wing. And that is going to lead, and that could lead to the Iranian regime surviving. And all they need to do is survive and wait it out until the Trump administration is out of office, and then all bets are off. I think that that is their strategy, that they consider that a better option than capitulating to the Trump administration's demands, which means that the only real solution to this whole thing is actually regime change. But again, there's going to be a lot of opposition from both from the Muslim world and from other voices, especially voices in America that are traumatized by bad regime change situations in countries like Iraq and Libya, that are going to be afraid that that's the same thing here. And we've talked about this, that it's a misunderstanding of Iran and how it's different from those other Muslim countries. But also in the news related to Iran, we have, let's check in on the Europeans, who have never been they've never been so reliable. But here, take a look. This is an encouraging sign. The European Parliament adopted an Iran rights resolution, 524-3, backing tougher EU action. The European Parliament has adopted a resolution condemning systemic oppression, inhumane conditions, and arbitrary detentions, by the clerical regime in Iran, approving the text by 524 votes in favor, 3 against, and 41 abstentions. MEPs call for an end to violence against civilians, an end to executions and repression, and the release of those held in arbitrary detention. The text also urges an immediate abolition of the death penalty. Now, obviously, calling on Iran to do things, it's kind of performative, but look what it says down here. The adopted text places particular emphasis on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, describing it as central to repression and urging expanded targeted sanctions, including asset freezes, travel bans against those responsible for abuses. Now, they didn't put sanctions on, so it's kind of weak, but at least the Europeans are moving in the right direction, and they're urging more sanctions. They're threatening the IRGC. But here's how absurd this is. While the European Union is voting this way, look what happened in the UN the other day. The United Nations named Iran the vice chair of the UN body promoting democracy and women's rights. I kid you not. This is like Saturday Night Live comedy sketch. Okay, this is the Commission for Social Development of the United Nations. Look at this. Iran's election as vice chair of the United Nations Commission for Social Development is being slammed by human rights advocates and policy analysts who've condemned the UN's hypocrisy when it comes to its treatment of undemocratic regimes. Okay, this is a commission that is supposed to be responsible for things like human rights, women's rights. It's insane. The UN Commission for Social Development. It's a UN body tasked with promoting democracy, gender equality, tolerance, and nonviolence. Okay, that's what this commission is supposed to do. And the Iranian representative was named the vice chair of this UN body, with everything else going on in Iran. Days after they've been slaughtering their own people, they get named. So this is, if you needed more evidence that the United Nations is a completely bankrupt and irrelevant institution, this is it. And also on a positive note, here we have, this made the news a little bit, this Italian member of the European Parliament, Isabella Tovaglieri, tore up a picture of Iran's supreme leader. So she's in the European Parliament. That's the same parliament that voted for the resolution that we just talked about, that threatening Iran with sanctions. She tore up a picture of Ali Khamenei in the European Parliament on Wednesday as she accused left-wing parties of a scandalous double standard over Tehran. Let's go take a look at the clip of this. It's kind of cool. Here you go.
Viva la democrazia e viva la libertà. Il movimento europeo pro Gaza è rimasto a casa di fronte alla brutale repressione del popolo iraniano.
Right, so she's calling out the pro-Gaza movement for not protesting on behalf, for not speaking up on behalf of the Iranian people.
Che lotta per la libertà. È rimasto in silenzio di fronte alle migliaia di sacchi neri, di cadaveri, alle esecuzioni di massa degli ayatollah che sono considerati intoccabili solo perché antisionisti e anti-americani. Nessuna flottiglia che salpa, nessun liceo occupato, nessuna manifestazione di piazza, solo una scandalosa doppia morale che antepone l'ideologia ai diritti delle donne e dei giovani iraniani.
There we go. So, yeah, she's calling them out, and the clip goes on a little bit longer. She's calling them out for the double standards, specifically referencing the fact that they're all out there defending Gaza, defending Hamas, but they're not defending the Iranian people who are fighting for their freedom. Now, I found this worthy of mentioning, this incident of her tearing up this picture, because, and this is a topic I've raised before, and it's so important. I want to keep hammering it home. This MP, this member of the European Parliament, Isabella Tovaglieri, is from the Lega party. That's Salvini's party in Italy. They are populist, nationalist, right-wing conservatives. And I keep pointing this out. We have to get our heads straight, especially to the Jews in this audience here. Listen up. Historically, populist, nationalist, right-wingers, when you go back a couple generations, they were people that Jews didn't want to associate with, and there were often some anti-Semitic elements in there. Things have shifted. Things have changed. We can't romanticize these political relationships. We have to look at who our friends are at all over the world, whether it's the Orban supporters in Hungary, the Vox supporters in Spain, the Bolsonaro supporters in Brazil, the Wilders supporters in the Netherlands, all over the world. Populist, nationalist, right-wing people, conservatives, political conservatives, are the pro-Israel camp, and this is just another example of it. Now, on the Israel side, this was an interesting story that caught my eye from just a couple days ago. The IDF spokesman in Persian, yes, the IDF has a spokesman who puts out messaging in Persian, and the Iranian people follow this very closely. They urged Iranians to communicate through official Israeli channels. Listen to this post on X that was put up. I saw a story about it. It said, "We kindly request patriotic Iranian people to please only follow our official channels of contact and get in touch with us for any kind of cooperation." They're inviting Iranians to get in touch with the IDF, with the Israelis, to cooperate. The pages and links included in this post are the only official and legitimate accounts. And then they put links in there for Iranian people to get in touch with the Israelis for cooperation. And, so this is the Israelis actually recruiting activists in Iran for some kind of cooperation. And this could mean that there's going to be some assistance on the ground, quiet assistance on the ground, behind the scenes assistance on the ground by the Israelis to the Iranian people should things escalate in Iran. And they will escalate later this week. We're expecting, there's an expectation later this week of significant protests erupting again in Iran. It has to do with the fact that the main massacres of civilians in Iran that took place by the regime took place on January 8th and 9th, around then. And we're getting to the 40-day point in a couple days. The 17th and 18th of February are going to be the 40-day point. And in Islamic cultures and in a lot of Middle Eastern cultures, 40 days after death, that's the end of the period of mourning. And it's often been a time where things have flared up again. People express, when it comes to political deaths, where there's some response. For example, when Mahsa Amini, that girl who was killed for not wearing her hijab, she was arrested for not wearing a hijab back in 2022, and then she was killed in custody, and that led to mass demonstrations. But the big Mahsa Amini demonstrations in 2022, 40 days after she was killed, there was a flare-up of these mass demonstrations. And in fact, there's been a call for mass demonstrations for the 17th and 18th of February. And, and that's coming in a couple of days. So with everything else going on, we're going to see a challenge to the regime with people taking to the streets again. Perhaps we'll see how they respond to that in the midst of everything else. Okay, that's our Iran update for today. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share, tell everyone about what we're doing on this channel. If you find it helpful, drop a comment and let me know what you think. And please check out all the content that we're putting up at Israel 365 News YouTube channel, especially the video I just made the other day about Iran's strategy. I go into a lot of detail there about how they're playing this chess game right now. All right, God bless.